Hello, welcome to Ray-ality TV. I'm Raymond Bakari, and today I'm joined by Casandra Inez, who is running in the Providence City Council Ward 15 special election to fill the vacancy after then Council President Sabina Matos was selected to be the state's Lieutenant Governor. Ms. Inez, how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me, Ray.
No problem. It's a pleasure of mine to have you on the show. Just diving right into it here, what made you want to run in the City Council Ward 15 special election, and why are you the best to represent the ward?
Sure. So I grew up in Providence. My family's Guatemalan. I'm a public school teacher, an artist, a parent, own a small business. And I really want to fight for Ward 15 in our neighborhoods. Me and my partner, we're raising our daughter on Valley Street. And we've grown to really value family, the arts, and community. So I decided to run for city council because I feel like it's time our community gets that independent voice, advocating for like real meaningful changes. I want to bring attention to the urgency that we have in Ward 15 to issues that are really important to the folks here. And as a city councilor, I want to ensure that families have a better experience than what I had growing up. I'm going to be fighting for our schools so we can, better educate and prepare them for the real world, for safe and healthier neighborhoods, and just to make sure that we have good jobs and, we can access affordable housing and really start building wealth for our families so that we can pass that on.
And there are a few other candidates running in this election. This is going to be a competitive one since there's no incumbent, and it's a special election that's spurred out of the moment after then Council President Matos was selected to be Lieutenant Governor. Just hypothetically speaking, if you don't end up winning the special election, the primary on June 8th, are there any plans to run for the seat in the 2022 election cycle?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm getting lots of experience, running this campaign as a first timer. And if I'm not successful, I certainly look forward to running again.
And now moving to some of the issues in council elections, mainly it's knocking on doors, hearing what's on the constituents' minds, and sending out mailers. What have been some of the issues you have heard from residents here in Ward 15, and what are some of them that you are currently highlighting in the campaign?
I've been hearing a need for safer streets, number one, better sidewalks and roads, yeah, but also a need to address driving at dangerous speeds on residential streets and crime. There's a desire for a healthier environment. We have rats, trash, traffic, all polluting this area. Lack of affordable housing, definitely another one. It's hard to find a rental unit that's attractive and affordable, especially for families. And so there are also barriers for folks who want to buy a home, right? Who are looking to take that next step. And we've also got to talk about the homeless population and, different health patients that need more resources to get and keep them well. Because when we're all doing good, it uplifts us all. So we can definitely be doing much better for those who need it most.
And now looking at some of the issues facing the city, one of them you had mentioned is the roads and sidewalks. They're not in good shape or even clean in some cases. They're cracked. You see mattresses. You mentioned the rodents problem. And how would you address this issue if elected to the council?
I've been part of a bunch of community cleanups. When it doesn't get done by the city, the community certainly has, taken that into their hands. But doing everything I can to fight for more attention so that we can get the help we need to, address those issues.
And you had also mentioned crime as another issue, and this is more of a citywide issue, which is the push to defund the police, which has mixed reactions for a number of reasons, especially with the uptick in crime recently. We've seen a number of horrific shootings around the area, unfortunately. And just out of curiosity, where do you stand on the issue of defunding the police in the city of Providence?
Well, you're certainly right. It's not an easy conversation to have right now because of the recent gun violence that unfortunately devastates our city, most summers, right? It happens all the time. But I'll say this. I've been impacted by institutions that have been defunded for decades. The arts and music has been taken out of schools, not valued in the public realm. Education for so long as we know, healthcare, social support services. So our city lacks too many appropriate services and resources for its people. So I would love to see a city that, dedicates funding for those resources so that police can focus on responding to those high-risk crimes, such as the ones that we're seeing, in the best way possible.
And that is a common point when talking about the defunding the police conversation of there's talks about social workers maybe responding to certain issues, which then sparks the mixed reactions because they're curious where the money's still going to come from. So just out of curiosity, if you're taking money in the police budget and using it to have like a social worker responding to a mental health crisis, wouldn't that still technically be defunding the police because the money has to come from somewhere, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you put it that way, yeah, certainly. They wouldn't need to respond to all of those emergency calls that just overwhelm them all the time. So yeah, taking money from that budget to put into other resources would technically be defunding it. Yeah.
Are there any concerns that this could end up backfiring, given that we're entering the summer and seeing a spike in crime, which statistically it could get worse given how it has been in previous years?
I know. We're seeing pilot programs pop up all over the country. And, I would just keep a close eye on how those things are going and see what we can implement here safely and at a steady pace so that, it's not so quick that we miss those gaps and, we fall into more devastation. So, I'm definitely doing it in a step-by-step process.
And it has not gone well in cities like New York City, where they took $1 billion of the police budget and now they're putting some back, and same with Baltimore recently. So say, for example, in Providence, if we go with the taking money out of the police budget, is there what would be your cutoff and deal breaker before you start funding the police back to the way it was again?
That's hard to say. We definitely want to keep our residents safe, our families safe. We're raising children here, so I think we would just have to take it a step at a time and, make those decisions as they come. I wouldn't know the answer right now.
And now shifting topics to the topic of education, specifically charter schools in the city. Recently, there's been more of a push against things like charter schools and school choice from those on the left, especially in Providence, where a lot of the Providence elected officials don't seem to be in favor of the expansion of charter schools, like their counterparts, Governor Dan McKee and even Lieutenant Governor Matos. They're more in favor of the charter schools being the expansion of it. And just out of curiosity, where do you stand on the expansion of charter schools in the city of Providence, and why?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it's definitely a hot topic, especially as an educator right now. First, I think the funding formula is just straight up inequality, right? The city should never have to discuss the action of taking money from one underfunded, crumbling education system to fuel schools that may not accept any student who's interested without judgment, right? And that may perform at similar rates or sometimes higher rates due to inflation, just so that a few students might get the option to sign up for a lottery to get in, right? Because that's what they do. They sign up for a lottery, and we need a better system, first of all, right, to fund those choices. But I'd rather try to fix a system that would benefit everyone. And as a city councilor, I would fight for a better education for all students, no matter what, and not continue to just plug holes with temporary solutions. This is something that's been hurting us for a long time, right? So it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of effort to get on the right track.
So it sounds like you're not as in favor of the expansion of charter schools in Providence?
No, not right now, unfortunately.
And you had mentioned funding, which it's an interesting topic that has multiple avenues. So I'll approach it with this avenue that's actually more relevant now than when I had first drafted these questions a few weeks ago. So the city's budget, a big portion of it is used to fill the hole of the unfunded pension obligations. That's $2 billion in the hole. And if it keeps going further, there could be the risk of receivership, which we do not want that in the city of Providence. Most of the residents, I'm not going to speak on their behalf because we have to stay neutral on the show. But $2 billion in the hole. There has been proposals of fixing this issue. One of those proposals is actually something that happened in Cranston about 10 years ago, I want to say, with the Teamsters Union and laborers unions. ditching the pension business entirely and then moving to where those city employees each got their own 401ks and IRAs that they own themselves, taking the burden off of the city. So then you can use the money for basic city services like schools, fixing our damaged roads, and et cetera. If elected to the city council, does that sound like something you'd be in favor of to fix the problem with things like funding for schools?
That can be a possibility. I would like to look more into it. What you're saying sounds reasonable, but I would like to do more research and learn more to see if that would be a good option for Providence.
And now shifting to another subtopic within the umbrella topic of education, the state takeover. It has a lot of mixed reactions like the expansion of charter schools. Currently, where do you stand on the state takeover?
Unfortunately, I just feel like the lack of collaboration among the stakeholders, that's students, teachers, parents, families, right? It just hasn't been happening. And so unfortunately, I haven't really seen it as a successful transformation. We're about a year in, maybe a little over a year. And, from what I see in my classroom every day, not much has changed and some things have actually gotten worse.
So right now you would get rid of the state takeover situation and go back to what it was before?
Yeah, handing our education system over to the state really takes away from our investment in our voice in what we're doing with our children and their education. So yeah, I would like to see it go back to the city.
And before the state takeover, the reason why the state takeover had occurred was because the public schools were failing for a number of years. There's multiple arguments to what that could have been caused by. And going back to the charter school topic before we shift the topics again, charter schools also still perform well, like you had mentioned, and give great opportunities for parents who don't want their child to be stuck in a public school where their opportunities could be limited and the danger of things like being lost in the shuffle are higher. And public polling shows that parents, especially in this ward, are more in favor, well, in the city, I will say, I'm not sure about the ward because it was more of a city thing, are more in favor of charter schools now than ever before. You had mentioned you're not being in favor of the expansion of charter schools. So should residents and parents of Ward 15 be concerned of the issues that could come with going back to how it was before and not expanding charter schools and the possibility of a risk of an indictment on their child's education?
Yeah, I think, this is such a tough conversation because, we're talking about the future and lives currently, right, happening in real time of thousands of children. If it were to go back to the city, we can't continue doing what we were doing. Obviously, that wasn't working. And I know that the rise in favor of charter schools among parents is because they see, they've known that failure for so long. And I'm scared too. I have a 2.5-year-old daughter and who should be entering, some pre-K program and continuing through the system as well. And just, thinking about what that future might mean for her is really, what's on every parent's mind. So, going back to the city is not going to fix all our problems. Obviously, we have to do it in a different way. But I think it would help include more of the stakeholder voices in those decision-making processes.
And would it be and so those who are more in favor of the charter schools bring up the fact that the public schools have not been performing as well. So is it a fair statement from what they're saying that not expanding the charter schools is providing an indictment on children's education in the city?
I mean, I would consider that short-term, a short-term solution because in the long run, a lot of charter schools, either end up closing, changing their charter, losing their charter. But our community schools have been here, for a long time. And we just have to make the investments in the, money, so financial investments and the resources to actually get them working the way that they should be. And using assessments that are more meaningful and that capture a child's learning rather than something that is just, standard.
And I know I had mentioned that was the final follow-up, but because since we're talking about this and it is an extensive topic, like a lot of the issues in the city, school choice also comes up in this. And this would, if school choice were to be implemented, a child would not be limited to their educational opportunities by their zip code, which, in Providence, that's a big problem, not as much in other cities and towns in the state. So where would you stand on school choice, giving the funding the students rather than systems and letting the students be able to have their parents choose what school they want them to go to instead of just being restricted by the zip code.
Right. Yeah. I don't think we should rely on sending a child across the city for a better school. I think every family deserves a great option near their home, but I do think schools could offer special programs that any Providence student could attend, because one building doesn't have the space to accommodate all the possibilities, right, that we can potentially offer. So, I think, to equal the playing field, every school should be great and have, provide a great education. But as far as like special programs or job training programs, I think, it'd be safe to say that those can exist in different schools, and parents should have the option to send their child there if that's something they're interested in.
And now, shifting away from the issues for a moment, the composition of the council leadership is different, with now Council President John Igliozzi being Council President and Councilman Pedro Espinel being the President pro tempore. Are you in favor of both of those council members being in those leadership positions?
That process has been done, and that was not part of that decision. But I do look forward to working with everyone on the council, including its leaders. I don't have that experience working with them. I just know what the public view is of those people. And I'd rather get in there and work with them myself before I make any sort of judgment or decision.
And I believe also the council majority leader is going to be up for grabs, since Councilwoman Joanne Ryan is now going to chair the Finance Committee, since Councilman Igliozzi is now Council President. Do you have any council member in mind that you would vote for the majority leader role?
Yeah, that's a lot of movement, given this special election, same deal. Not at the moment. Again, I'd want to get a feel more of what the council people are about and who has that leadership quality.
And another question that I've also asked a lot of the other candidates in this election is about the 2022 Providence Mayoral election, since it plays a big role, since Ward 15 is a big ward and has a lot of votes that are going to be influential in electing our next mayor. And endorsements are key in mayoral elections, given that Providence is a very small city. Out of the current list of candidates that are either running or could speculated to be running, are there anyone that you would support currently?
Yeah, a lot's happening, with elected officials in the next couple months, couple years. I look forward to learning more about them and potentially meeting all or most of the candidates, but I'm going to wait until at least next year before, making a decision on that too. Is
there a certain time next year? Because the primary will be in September. So like a few months from now is when we're going to start getting into the peak, and you're going to start seeing ads and I guess rallies if COVID is died down by then with the vaccination rates going up.
Yeah. I just want someone who's going to do the best thing for the city. And, I don't know who that person is yet, but.
So no expected timeline.
For the time. Yeah.
Because you said next year, because the primaries are September. With like, are we talking next this fall coming up, next winter, next spring?
I guess as soon as possible, huh?
The day before the primary?
No, I have to do my research as soon as possible, and again, when all the candidates are ready to go and make that choice. But I don't know when. Yeah, I don't know when.
It is going to be a competitive election. We don't know every single candidate yet. There are a few other candidates speculated, like Representative Hull, Representative Diaz, maybe Dylan Conley, who was also on the show, depending on if he runs for Congress or not. Right now, it's looking like 2014 levels of competitiveness. So that's why that question is always asked, because the endorsements were key in that election, as will be in this one.
It's going to be big. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I understand.
And now shifting the focus to one of the most notable things that the current mayor, Mayor Lorza, had done during his time was making Providence a sanctuary city. Where do you stand on Providence's status as a sanctuary city?
I don't think we offer as much protection as other places, although, we're labeled as such. But, I think protecting people who have, who are lower level, what would you say, like lower level concerns, and isn't a terrible thing until it makes it a problem. So our status as a sanctuary city, I guess, is, I guess I'm in favor of what that means so far.
So content with the label, but you would be in favor of going further?
Potentially, right? That could mean a couple of things. But it also doesn't mean that everyone's completely safe, right? You know, I think maybe 2 years ago now, we saw a big uptick in ICE traveling through our neighborhoods, picking people up, you know, more than I've ever seen growing up in Providence. So, and we were considered a sanctuary city back then. So, you know, I don't know what it would really mean in the future, but we'll see.
And you had mentioned ICE, which actually plays a role into my next question, because the common consensus that I've gotten from other candidates and Brett Smiley, when I had interviewed him about his candidacy for mayor, is that when it comes to if someone who was here based on someone who is here that was being protected by the status commits a crime, then that's when the line would be drawn. We've seen examples in sanctuary cities across the country. For example, in San Francisco, California, a sanctuary city saw Kate Steinle get shot and killed by an undocumented immigrant who had been deported multiple times in the past and was being protected by that city status, which brought a lot of mixed reactions and controversy around the label of a sanctuary city. If something similar were to happen in Providence, should the status be reconsidered or potentially removed?
You know, I don't think any status should protect a criminal, you know, whether they were born here or not, or whatever occupation or capacity they hold. So I wouldn't agree that it should protect criminals in any way. No.
And this now going back to when you had mentioned ICE, because now there's more pushes as we see the defund the police messaging. We're also seeing the defund ICE or abolish ICE messaging, which could be very concerning for those who want safe neighborhoods and don't want upticks in crime. And you're seeing this messaging from a lot of those more on the left, even some Rhode Island politicians. That this led to the closing of the detention center in Central Falls. So just out of curiosity, are you for or against abolishing or defunding ICE?
You know, I think those movements to defund ICE and defund the police come from other root issues that we're not addressing. And so then, you know, again, it gets laid on those enforcement agencies. And so then we call for defunding those things, right? So if we're looking at the bigger picture and recognizing that that's not what these movements are always about, then yeah, I can agree and say to defund ICE, because, you know, the number of people who are trying to apply the legitimate way is very high. And so, you know, that process ends up taking a very long time. You know, people are brought here in different ways. Children are brought here, you know, without their own consent because they're children, you know, so we have to create systems that are going to be able to process those different scenarios in a timely manner, so that we don't get overwhelmed and depend on this punitive system to capture individuals because, you know, of some process that was failing them.
And you had mentioned in one of the previous answers that if someone commits a crime, they should not be protected. And ICE's role would be to get those who are committing crimes out of the neighborhoods and not in society where they could be causing crimes. Just out of curiosity, because you're mentioning that you seem in favor of the defunding ICE, but then again, you had mentioned to make sure that criminals are not being protected by the status. Isn't that a little contradictory?
Yeah, I guess, you know, when we think about right or wrong, the law is not always moral, right? So, you know, it's different from a person who overstayed their welcome because their paperwork got backed up because they didn't get a certain signature or meet a certain deadline, who we may call a criminal, versus someone who murdered another person, right? And those two people shouldn't be seen as the same level as criminality, right? So when I'm talking about defunding, when I'm talking about criminals that shouldn't be protected because of our status as a sanctuary city, I'm talking about the higher level crime, not more of the petty criminals.
But wouldn't could the concern of the crime upticks and all that could be an effect from the cause of defunding ICE? Just out of curiosity, because it goes back to the whole defunding the police thing, where if you take money from ICE, and you know there is a common consensus of making the process more efficient and quicker, but if you take money away from ICE, who you want to get rid of the criminals, wouldn't there be a concern that if you're taking money away from them, they wouldn't be able to effectively get rid of those said criminals committing the major crimes like you're mentioning?
I mean, well, yeah, in theory, if they had less work to do, they wouldn't need as much money. I guess that's what it comes down to. And that's the hope, right? That as we take money away, that they don't need it, right? I wouldn't want to take money away to cover those services that our community does need for protection and safety. So, I guess there's a limit on everything.
And now shifting to the non-political topics for these last two questions, I noticed that when preparing for this interview, you had graduated from Rick in 2016. I always like to ask this question as a current Rick student myself. And just out of curiosity, what was your time as a student at Rick, and is there anything you missed the most about it?
Yeah, it's funny. I started attending Rick a little later than most young folks. I started when I was 24. I'm such a sponge. I love learning. I had some great professors, some not so great professors. But overall, I appreciated the experience. I was a part of a lot of on-campus groups, which I think is very important for any student, whether you're living on campus or not, to experience, just so you have that sense of community.
And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, in some of because you were an education major, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I believe in their curriculums, you have to teach a class as a part of I think it's a course or something at the Henry Barnard School. Did you get to do that during your time?
So I did mine because I'm secondary ed. I did mine split between the Met School and Mount Pleasant High School.
And now shifting to my final question, which is one that I ask everyone on the show to keep tradition, and that is, in your opinion, what do you think Rhode Island is best known for?
Newport, the oceanfront, seafood, that whole vibe.
It sure is one of the best things we're known for, which is where I believe the Ocean State motto comes from. Have you ever taken a visit to see the mansions?
Yeah, I have.
It's one of the things I plan to do in the summer too. I haven't been able to do it yet. Just out of curiosity, because I'm going to ask a follow-up since we're focusing on a Providence selection. What about Providence? Is there any distinct qualities that you feel that they're best known for too? Providence?
At some point, other times better than other times, art and music. I think the creative capital didn't come out of anywhere, especially Olneyville. We have that history of underground art scene, in the mills and, so I think art and music could be Providence's thing.
Oh, most definitely. And Shepard Fairey is a big example of that. He painted his 100th mural, I believe, in downtown Providence.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on PVD Fest coming back? Because I know there's a push. I heard this on Twitter. Travis Escobar, I follow him and he follows me back. He's a great dude. He ended up talking about making a push to make PVD Fest multiple times a year. What would you think about that? Because that honestly would be amazing. It's lit in PVD Fest in the summer.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that would be great. Artists don't work once a year. They're working all year round. So I'm sure we have plenty of people who would love to participate in different events and performances throughout the year. I think that's a great idea.
And a quick follow-up, because I know I said that was the last one, but just out of curiosity, because you work with AS220, right? What's your role with AS220? Because they actually worked with my high school that I attended, TAPA.
Oh, okay. So similar experience. When I was in high school, our senior year, we had to do an internship, and I was really into music production. So I interned at AS220, met great people that I still know today, as well as that person who Shepard Fairey painted, Angel Newman. She was one of the first other youth that I worked with when I was at AS220.
It's a great organization, and I wish I had spent more time there. I hadn't been able to go there because I had also other commitments, but I hear a lot of great things about the organization. They even pay young artists I believe they pay artists to teach courses. I know they have I think they have a beat making class too, which was really intriguing when they had mentioned it. It's a great organization all around. Miss Inez, I want to thank you once again for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure of mine to have you on.
Thank you. I appreciate your time, and shout out to you, Ray, for interviewing every candidate in this race. That's good.
Thanks. And thank you once again for watching this episode of Ray-ality TV. If you want to see future episodes as soon as they're posted on this channel, please click the subscribe button down below, along with the post notification bell icon to the right of it. I'm Raymond Bakari, and I'll see you on the next episode.